ongoing lawsuits in key swing states allege massive voter fraud. Is it actually possible Trump could be re-elected? Welcome to America Uncovered. I'm Chris Chappell. It's the election that never ends, as if 2020 didn't have enough to throw at us already. Last week, President Trump made his first televised appearance since the election, and he says he's not conceding.
It's going to be a very hard thing to concede because we know there was massive fraud.
Massive voter fraud. That's the claim the Trump campaign is making. According to Trump's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, the Trump campaign is taking their case to state legislators and ultimately the Supreme Court.
There are any number of cases that we can take to the Supreme Court. We have to decide which is the right one. There may even be one that hasn't been started yet, but will be started in the next day or two. That might be the right one. So there's a real strategy in how to get to the Supreme Court. Also, if we could get one or two of the legislatures to rule for us, then the Biden people would take it to the Supreme Court. So we may be there in two different capacities.
Those court cases are what will decide once and for all whether the evidence of massive voter fraud actually holds up. Adding confusion to the mix is this: a big story in the Associated Press on Tuesday that made it sound like U.S. Attorney General William Barr says there was no widespread election fraud. But that is not what Barr said. The headline is totally misleading. In the article, Barr is quoted only once in which he says, "To date, we have not seen fraud on a scale that could have affected a different outcome in the election." In other words, he did not say whether there was voter fraud or not. He only said he hadn't seen evidence that it was enough to swing the election, and only that that's the situation to date. The article also acknowledges that Barr told the AP that U.S. attorneys and FBI agents have been working to follow up specific complaints and information they've received. Which, wait, they're still investigating and they haven't drawn a conclusion yet. This is actually a really boring story. Why is it news? Because it fits the narrative that the Trump campaign's voter fraud cases are falling apart. And since the Associated Press is a newswire service picked up by most major media, even a very boring story with no conclusion can have a huge influence. By Tuesday evening, the narrative had been picked up by dozens of media outlets, including the New York Times, the Washington Post, and even the BBC for some reason. Later on Tuesday, in response to that misleading Associated Press article, a CBS reporter said a DOJ spokesperson told her that some media outlets have incorrectly reported that the department has concluded its investigation of election fraud and announced an affirmative finding of no fraud in the election. That is not what the Associated Press reported, nor what the Attorney General stated. The department will continue to receive and vigorously pursue all specific and credible allegations of fraud as expeditiously as possible. And that's why you should never get your news from only reading headlines. Meanwhile, you'll never guess who is claiming he has seen evidence of voter fraud in the U.S. Brazil's president, Jair Bolsonaro. He told reporters, "I have my sources of information that there really was a lot of fraud there. Nobody talks about that. If it was enough to define victory for one or the other, I don't know." Which makes me wonder, what kind of intelligence operations Brazil has in the U.S.? But anyway, there are still ongoing recounts and lawsuits in key swing states, with numerous allegations of voter fraud. None of them individually is likely to swing the election, but there are a lot of them in a lot of different states. So I'll take you through some of the major ones right after this short break. Welcome back. There are lots of allegations of voter fraud across several states. Let's start with Wisconsin. On Sunday, Wisconsin finished a partial recount, and it uncovered 87 extra votes for Biden. Extra votes for Biden? The Trump campaign requested and paid for the recount, so they're probably feeling a bit of buyer's remorse right now. And that obviously meant that Wisconsin certified Biden as the winner, which led to another lawsuit challenging the results again. In a statement, the Trump campaign said, today's suit includes 4 cases with clear evidence of unlawfulness, such as illegally altering absentee ballot envelopes, counting ballots that had no required application, overlooking unlawful claims of indefinite confinement, and holding illegal voting events called Democracy in the Park. Those are things that would not necessarily have come out in a partial recount. The Trump campaign alleges about 221,000 absentee ballots were improperly filed. Biden edged out Trump in Wisconsin by receiving about 20,000 more votes in that state. That may or may not be true, but one thing's for sure. The state of Wisconsin has never gotten so much publicity that's not related to cheese or football. Now, on to Michigan. The Michigan Senate Oversight Committee held a hearing where they heard sworn witness testimony about voter fraud. Now, that wasn't an actual court case where all the evidence would be presented, but it was a way for the public to become aware of some of the claims being made. You might want to watch it. Some of the claims are pretty shocking. Also in Michigan, Sidney Powell has filed a lawsuit. She's not officially part of the Trump campaign, but she's filing lawsuits that are similar in purpose. Her Michigan lawsuit includes a sworn statement, called an affidavit, from a former military intelligence analyst whose name was redacted. Powell's court filing says the affidavit shows the Dominion voting machine software was accessed by agents acting on behalf of China and Iran in order to monitor and manipulate elections, including the most recent U.S. general election in 2020. There are other sworn statements involving problems with backdoor access to vote counting machines.
Dr. Naveed Keshavar's Nia has a PhD in engineering and technology and received advanced training from the CIA, NSA, and DHS. In a sworn statement, he says he believes that USB memory cards were used to facilitate administrative backdoor access to disrupt polling operations and impact ballot counting across Michigan, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Arizona, and Wisconsin.
And this sworn affidavit by an IT contractor for Dominion says the voting machines were connected to the internet, making them vulnerable to hackers. She also spoke at the recent hearing.
What I witnessed at the TCF Center was complete fraud. The whole 27 hours I was there, there was batches of ballots being ran through the tabulating machines numerous times, being counted 8 to 10 times. There was not a single ballot the whole night, the whole 27 hours I was there that I saw that was for Donald Trump, not one, not a single ballot. That is scary.
And the Amistad Project, a civil liberties initiative started by the Thomas More Society, a conservative public interest law firm, has filed a lawsuit saying Michigan officials brazenly violated election laws. Next up, Pennsylvania. A lower court in Pennsylvania had delayed the certification of election results because of a Republican lawsuit. They were challenging a 2019 law creating universal mail-in ballots. They said it violated the state constitution. But on November 28th, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court dismissed the Republican lawsuit on procedural grounds. That's because the Republican petitioners waited too long to file their suit challenging the 2019 law. So does that mean at least this one part of the 2020 election nightmare is over? No, it just means the GOP plaintiffs are appealing it up to the U.S. Supreme Court. Meanwhile, a Republican state senator tweeted, "There is mounting evidence that the Pennsylvania presidential election was compromised." And he suggested that now the state legislature has the sole authority to direct the manner of selecting delegates to the Electoral College. I'm sure that would be popular. But as in other swing states, there are also allegations that voting machines in Pennsylvania compromised the election.
Data expert Justin Hart, who worked for Mitt Romney in 2012, says vote tabulation data in key states have anomalies, with significant swings toward Democrat Joe Biden. He based his analysis on real-time Election Day entries from the New York Times. In a tweet, Hart shows 25 data dumps in Pennsylvania where Trump lost votes from the feeds. He points out that Trump lost 97,676 votes, while Biden gained over 160,000 votes.
And after holding a public hearing in Pennsylvania last week, Rudy Giuliani went on Fox Business News to say the Trump team has a mountain of evidence and you ain't seen nothing yet. Which is definitely true. We haven't seen all that much yet. We'll have to wait until Giuliani gets that case in front of the Supreme Court to actually see something yet. Which means we have time for another quick commercial break. Welcome back. And now let's move on to Georgia, where this week a group of Trump supporters held this Stop the Steal protest. A Trump campaign lawyer in Georgia is calling for an audit of up to 45,000 votes believed to be fraudulent. Sidney Powell also has filed a lawsuit in Georgia, alleging massive fraud. And like her case in Michigan, her case in Georgia focuses on the vulnerabilities of voting machines. An analysis of the Dominion software system by a former U.S. military intelligence expert concludes that the system and software have been accessible and were certainly compromised by rogue actors such as Iran and China. Boy, it seems like there's a lot of problems with Dominion, which is also concerning since the Dominion machines will be used for 2 Senate runoff elections in Georgia next month, which will determine whether Democrats or Republicans get a Senate majority. So someone should really take a look at those Dominion machines. Except they tried to wipe them. Imagine that. But a judge approved a restraining order and froze the machines in 3 Georgia counties, meaning the defendants were prevented from altering, destroying, or erasing, or allowing the alteration, destruction, or erasure of any software or data on any Dominion voting machine. Yeah, that sounds kind of sus. Powell claims a Dominion server was removed while the restraining order was in the works. She said someone went down to the Fulton Center where the votes and Dominion machines were, claimed there was a software glitch, and they had to replace the software, and it seemed that they removed the server. Oh, good. Powell has now filed an emergency appeal to have the voting machines in the whole state of Georgia frozen as well. Powell's case was originally scheduled for a hearing on Friday, but that has now been delayed. It's not like we were in a rush or anything to get this election wrapped up. Take your time. And now Nevada. An affidavit from a data scientist obtained by the Washington Examiner says that in part of Nevada, there was a historically strange jump in voter registrations missing the sex and age of the voter, making confirmation by poll workers impossible. In Nevada's 3rd congressional district, in the 2016 election, there were 68 voter registrations missing this critical data. In this 2020 election, there were more than 13,000. That represents more than 4% of the voters in the area. Huh. She also testifies, I have also identified dozens of voters who listed as their home or mailing addresses a temporary RV park and casino. People don't usually live in a casino. Except for my Uncle Nick, but that's another story. Meanwhile, an attorney for Trump said that they would be filing a new lawsuit in Nevada on Wednesday.
We are going to present evidence of real voter fraud. Thousands and thousands of instances in voter fraud in Nevada alone by 5 o'clock today that will be submitted to the court. And we have instances, for instance, of 40,000 plus people who have voted twice in the election. That's real voter fraud. We have data showing that people who were on the record as having voted by mail didn't even receive ballots and say that they didn't vote.
We recorded this episode yesterday before they actually filed the lawsuit, so we don't have any more information on that. There is another Trump lawsuit already going on in Nevada. A judge is holding a hearing on that one today. Okay, moving on. Arizona. In Arizona, Trump lawyers and members of the Arizona state legislature held a 10-hour hearing about voter fraud. I was on the edge of my seat, at least until hour 7, when I lost all feeling in my butt. Essentially, much of the witness testimony in Arizona was similar to other states. Weird ballots, Republican poll watchers prevented from doing their jobs, statistical anomalies.
The signature on the ballot that was being compared to other signatures didn't even resemble in any way what they were comparing it to. They were completely illegible. They were just scribbles on the ballot. And there were 5 screeners screening low-confidence ballots for an entire afternoon that I was in there.
Then there was a data scientist who said the only way Biden could have statistically caught up with Trump votes on Election Day was if Biden got 130% of Democratic votes and Trump got negative 30%.
But what's extraordinary about this graph, again, we went through many iterations, it matches perfectly. I find it highly implausible because this means that Mr. Biden got 130% of Democrat voters and negative 30%, and President Trump got negative 30%.
Arizona has certified Biden's victory. Obviously, like the other states that have certified the results, that doesn't mean this is over, because this whole mess will just continue to plow along until it gets to the Supreme Court. For example, here's mathematician Bobby Pitton at the hearing.
What is your opinion as to the validity of the numbers that were certified today by the Secretary of State and the governor about this election?
If I was an executive at a publicly traded company, I would never sign that because I risk jail time and having all my money taken from me in lawsuits. So to answer your question, I would never, ever have certified. I'd rather resign than have certified those results.
He was then suspended from Twitter. Though, because Twitter has given no reason for that, I can't say whether or not it was in connection to his testimony. There was also sworn testimony from Maricopa County GOP chairwoman Linda Brickman about Dominion switching votes from Trump to Biden. She said, "I observed with my Democratic partner the preparation of a new ballot since the original one was soiled or wouldn't go through the tabulators. I read her a Trump Republican ballot, and as soon as she entered it into the system, the ballot defaulted on the screen to a Biden Democratic ballot." She also says she was threatened by election supervisors for speaking out. Almost as scary as Twitter censorship. Honestly, it's hard keeping track of all the little pieces of the nationwide allegations of voter fraud. Every day there's something new. In fact, there will probably be new developments between when I recorded this episode and when you are watching it. But the bottom line is, the Trump campaign and others are presenting evidence of voter fraud. It comes in lots of little pieces across several states, but there's no single big smoking gun. That's why it's hard to tell what the big picture is or whether it will be enough to swing the election. Ultimately, some of these lawsuits will get in front of the U.S. Supreme Court, and we may have to wait until then to find out if the evidence is solid or just hot air. But until that happens, this is how the vote stands. And we probably won't know for sure who the next U.S. president is for many long weeks. Thanks, 2020. YouTube has been demonetizing a lot of our election coverage. So if you want to see more, please support the work we do on the crowdfunding website Patreon. Visit patreon.com/AmericaUncovered to find out how. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching America Uncovered.